So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per YHWH the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in YHWH the prophet, it is important glancing also at the prophecies of Daniel, because during this time of the restoration period there is a transition taking place, and this particular transition not only makes reference of tabernacling, but also of trade and military. Now, understandably, the 11th chapter of Daniel gives us very many details regarding the time of the restoration, and a few portions of it also the time of the autumn feast. And then Daniel 11 explains a very concise understanding of this period of time. So during the time of Darius the Mede, in the first year, then Daniel received these understandings, and he saw that there are four governments, four main leaders until the time of the end. Now, some of these, they are related with kingdoms until the coming of the Hamashiach ben Yosef. Then later on became 1,000 years where then tabernacling was not influential. Then the kingdoms of the world came up with a new world order of their own. Now the time of the restoration period, however, brings the principles that already had taken place in the past, and they were at a glance already completed. Now the restoration very wisely takes these understandings and then reflects them in the future of the scripture. Extremely wise, because then people cannot under any condition modify these holy manuscripts. So the times and the seasons obviously is showing the power of the sons of Yavan, one of the sons of Noah, and the influence the sons of Yavan had during this time of what Daniel is describing, known as the Greco country. Now there is flow of events exactly the same regarding the restoration period and the relationship amongst the nations. So during this particular time we find then the kingdom of the north, and during our time it's very evident that the kingdom of the north makes reference of the Soviet Union. Now he's explaining then, and at some point they would make partnership with the kingdom of the north, but should not maintain its power. This is verse number 6. Then very interestingly, on the verse number 7 explains then a netzer. It's a very important agriculture Hebrew word. And this word is not used very often. In fact, when it makes usage of this particular word, makes a reference of the Hamashiach ben Yosef and the understanding of the olive plant when it's cut down, and then a sprout coming out of its main ramification system, and that's what we understand as the lineage of David. So this word is very important. Now then, Daniel, he was aware of the coming of the Hamashiach ben Yosef because he had a copy of Yirmiyahu the prophet. And as then the 70 years of a captivity, because the nation did not maintain the yearly Shabbat, then the nation was in exile for 70 years. And because of this point, we find then that this particular word regarding then the Netzer is making a reference of a system. So this system that was previously exercised during the time of the Soviet Union, some 20 years plus earlier of our time, a bit more, we then understand that the power exercised during those times were for the military dominance of the time, but not trade. Now the world cannot be led by military alone. There is another layer related with it, so then it makes the whole lot complete. What Daniel is explaining is there is a dominance of trade because of the sons of Ishmael. However, there is then a military power and organization that is very much active during this period of time. So there is absolutely no doubt that the kingdom of the north explained in Daniel the 11th chapter makes a reference of the Soviet Union regarding our period of time. So the flow of events and the influence of the Greco country is reflected during our period, not in the sons of Yavan, but then the kingdom of the north during our time. And then later on, 7 verses later, then you find then, because of these, then the kingdom of the north shall come certainly with a great army and much equipment. So it truly explains that the power of the kingdom of the north is directly related with the military equipment. These are the directions of Daniel the prophet. Now he was mostly dedicated for the kingdoms of the Gentiles, though he has a section of it related with tabernacling, but his contemporary Ezekiel was much more involved in tabernacling than Daniel was. So then, coming with a great army and much equipment, we find then the influence the kingdom of the north is only great because of the link with the kingdom of the east. Now it doesn't mean that one nation is depending upon the other in order for these prophecies to become real. That's not the point. But the point is there is a section of flow of events that depends upon these nations coming together, and then one of them mostly related with the trade and the other related with military influence. So then a couple of layers are already covered. The third layer is tabernacling, as we find mostly later on in chapter 12 of Daniel, and then the layer related with other prophets, Yeshayahu for instance, and then Ezekiel. But then what's going on as far as the West system? In the 21st verse of the 11th chapter. Why is then the system becoming very weakened? And why is it there are situations related with the ships of Kittin then retrieving from the world's scenario? Now, it's not only the fact that at some point the United States is going to withdraw a lot of its military from the world's scenario, but it's not because of a lack of a capability. It is truly because simply the lack of funding. That's what is mostly related with this. And quite honestly, the Kingdom of China is very strong at the moment and shall be until the end of times. And then the only situation that can improve the economy of this country is helping then the third layer related with tabernacling. So YHWH chapter 1:8 explains an area beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, because he's talking from a viewpoint from where tabernacling is located at. So there is a quote-unquote a geographical, spiritual understanding from where he's talking from, though he was from the records of the Hebrew manuscript, we know that he was in the Holy Land during the time of the prophecy. But in the spirit, he knew there was tabernacling in the area of today Ethiopia or Sudan, somewhere around that locality in the border of east of modern Ethiopia, or then find until reaches areas of the Arabian Peninsula, and then sections of Sudan. So the Kingdom of Ethiopia was very big. But in the border of Ethiopia and Sudan, of what we know as today, back then was only a kingdom. It was a huge portion of a kingdom only. Now the modern would be the westernmost side of Ethiopia and the easternmost side of Sudan, somewhere around that area, the Butana region. There are indications that tabernacling came from the region. Now, nobody knows exactly where it was located at. Not at this point in time, until the time comes for the re-establishing of tabernacling. So then, because of these, we find then Congo extremely important, establishing then later on that this system that was extremely weakened, spoken of in the 21st verse of the 11th chapter, then later on the 28th comes out with great wealth. So the point is, with Fidel Castro then gone, there is an opening for the industry of the Soviet Union concerning arms. Che Guevara and Castro had obviously a great forward motion regarding the revolutionary spirit or the socialist spirit, though back then it was a bit mixed with the military dominance versus trade dominance, because the trade dominance then is in Gelah or Revelation. You find then the forward motion area from the time of Gelah or Revelation is truly trade, while the military is already established and then protecting trade worldwide. So then, these understandings explain that the system is broken, but not in anger, not in conflict. Now, in anger, most often you find is related with a combat or a war. But because of the system in itself became severely weakened. And at this point in time, the elected government of this country is acting more as an interim government than truly an elected president awaiting for later decisions. So many decisions are taking place prior of the 20th of next year. So in many countries they would observe these as usurpation of power, because the delegation of power won't be until the 20th of next year. So we've got more than a month yet. So it's a very strange situation like this. However, because of the deals the existing president mentioned regarding the transition and so on and so forth, so at first glance the existing government decided, quote unquote, to help the new transition, though it should not take place until after the 20th. So there are some intriguing situations regarding this particular point in time of this nation. But the other nations are reacting. The Taiwanese government is reacting. The Asian market is reacting. So from what we can understand, the reactions are not very positive at this point in time. And truly the indication is these decisions is not helping our country, but rather is truly making a big deal out of a situation that's not very important. So then the fact regarding this period of time is not military dominance from our country, but truly it is a link with the divine regarding tabernacling, as if this nation was on standby from a trade and military mindset of the past, and then learning tabernacling and trusting the divine eternal presence for guidance. So then, understandably, the Chinese is recruiting the services of the Soviet Union, and the world's trade is then protected by this military power. It's very evident because later on, in the 11th chapter and 7 verses later, then regarding the combat of the end, then the kingdom of the north shall come with a great army and much equipment. He didn't say the kingdom of the east or the kingdom of the south. He only makes a reference of great army and much equipment only related with what we know of as of today, the Soviet Union. So it doesn't take much for our understanding is that they are going to be in very many sides of this world protecting trade. Now, because of the financial burden of our government comes a time of restructuring. And this restructuring is directly related with the kingdom of China. So these are transitions that Daniel is explaining, and it's very evident when he explains the step-by-step formation And then later on we find then the retrieval of ships of Khitan. This was simply an understanding of the military power of the time. But they do this as a relief of a burden, of an economical burden, and then restructuring our country. And then tabernacling, a portion related with the YHWH chapter 1:8 explains then the violent ones beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, speaks of trade. It's the only important link YHWH makes from the viewpoint of tabernacling. Then Congo primarily is a country extremely rich. Now, there is a country that's going to come out of this weakening state and later on coming out of it with much wealth. Now, the Kingdom of the North is already wealthy because they're going to get their share of the great wealth by arms being sold at a great price. That's why the dominance of the armies of the future are led by the Northern Kingdom. It doesn't mean that the Kingdom of the East is not part of it. It only shows that the power of the Northern Kingdom relates with arms. So then, the only point that can help our nation reorganize its economy is a direct link with the Congo. And organizing the mines, organize the distribution and trade of rare minerals. And then from then on, obviously, there shall be a retrieval of a lot of our military, so then they can come from the discipline of the field and then reorganize this country. So then the analogy is similarly as when Moses, then the Hamashiach ben Yosef, gave various understandings of the period of time of Moses. When he went to Mitzrayim and he gathered his people. Now there is a point where then the Pharaoh was concerned regarding the multiplication of the Hebrews in the land. Now there is a combining factor when the nation then was ready for the Exodus. So Aaron, who had a contact in a court of Mitzrayim, made a deal and he linked up with Moses. So it was a deal going on in the physical world prior of reaching the spiritual world. Now it's very evident when, if you are part of a large family, and let's say you have a couple and 10 sons and daughters, total of 10, 5 ladies, 5 men, and each of them then later on become wealthy. And then they find out that the parents, after they are gone, they have their own families, yet they are wealthy, then they find out that their parents, they are living in poverty. Now, what would be the normal reaction of the sons? Would not go in over there and helping them, providing them with what is required for a comfortable life? So the analogy that Daniel is showing is very similar. So then when the military, a great portion of it retrieve is for the organizing of their own country. As it was the combination of Pharaoh being concerned with the people that were so numerous on the land, and then the exodus of the people from Mitzrayim. Then they went to Midian. And Jethro was from behind the scenes. So then at least these first and second portions of Daniel is clear. Later on there are details of the formation of situations and circumstances regarding Europe and the formation of this trade worldwide, and then the formation of the armies and organization. So there is a whole lot more coming in the very near future prior of the last combat of the end. So then later on I'm going to talk more of these and discover more details from this particular scripture. Now the point is very important mentioning these, because what we understand as the kingdom of the north explains then that there is a continuation of a previous system. Now the direct understanding from, for instance, verse 7 and verse 6 is then the power of the Soviet Union before is then restored. So then we understand Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, and it was a great place where they built a lot of military equipment. And because of these great power later on, it gives indication that this area of the world must be rejoined. So then Crimea was obviously rejoined, and maybe won't take very long for the others then to become united with the Soviet Union as it was before, because the joining of this nation must bring great wealth. So then later on we'll talk more of these regarding then the formation of the armies and then the organization of the trade of the time of the end. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.